Good evening. This is the Ogden City Council meeting for April 10th, 2012. Let the roll call reflect that all council members are present, with the exception of Council Member Heyer, who should be joining us later this evening. And at this time, we will have Vice Chair Blair lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll now have a moment of silence. Thank you. Next on the agenda is an item of common consent. This is Resolution 2012-7 for the fiscal year 2013 Annual Action Plan. This is to set the public hearing for May 1st, 2012.
Chair Garner, I will make a motion that we set the public hearing for the Annual Action Plan for May 1st, 2012.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Wicks and a second from Vice Chair Blair. This is a roll call vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, excuse me, it's a roll call vote.
Roll call.
It does not need to be a roll call vote. It can be a voice vote. Yes.
So this is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. This will set the public hearing for May 1st. Next is a public hearing. This is the street name change at the Ogden Weber ATC. Mr. Montgomery. Want to excuse our Amy Maybe. She's out of town today, so Mr. Symes is helping us with the...
Well, while that is pulling up, I'll go ahead and just introduce the subject. The city had received a petition to name or rename those streets that are associated with the Ogden Weber Tech College. As you may be aware, years ago, the lower portion of that property was a subdivision in the city known as the Academy Heights Annex Subdivision. And the streets that were in the lower part of that were dedicated as part of the subdivision process. Over the years, of course, that facility has gone through various ownerships of the state in terms of the land there, the latest being the Ogden Weber Tech College. Back in 1983, when it was determined to make this a vocational school, the one street off of Washington Boulevard was changed from Southwell to AVC Lane to reflect the new vocational college that had been created on this property that had been for many years known as the Reform School. So the idea of changing street names is not new to this piece of property to reflect the use of the land, and the city's responsibility is to review and name streets, whether they be public or private, and approve those street name changes. And so in this request, the idea is to change the names to reflect the new college name of Weber Tech. So the petition asks that the streets that come into the property off of Washington Boulevard and also off of Monroe be given one name, and then the streets that make the circular loop be given another name. The city records did not have any names for the circular street or the street off of Monroe Boulevard. So it would be very appropriate to give these streets names. As the Planning Commission looked at this petition, the discussion was of College Tech Drive being those entrance road names, and Tech College Circle being the looped road name. There were some other proposals in the original petition to name this street and also to give the same name of this Dan Street to the ABC Lane, so they would have the same name as one is an in street and one is an out street. The Planning Commission had said that it would not be appropriate to change this name because of the east coordinates that this street gives, where these streets are a northern coordinate type scenario. And so to avoid confusion, this should still keep its east designation. In their recommendation to you, as they discussed this, they were required to find that in naming a street, it doesn't create confusion or impact emergency services, that the new names are not so close to other street names that it also becomes a confusing situation. And then there's a public purpose to the change. And so as they reviewed this, they found that there was a public purpose to these name changes, to use the Tech College Drive and Tech College Circle names to reflect the campus that has been created. I felt that was an appropriate public purpose to change those names. They also felt that using the Tech College Drive as for the entry street was appropriate, as well as the Tech College Circle for the circular street, that those were distinct enough that it would be easy to understand where a person is, and also emergency service to be able to respond to those. And so they had recommended approval. The one item they did not recommend approval on was the naming of this also as a Tech College Drive, which is referred to as Dan Street by the city. It was determined that when the dedication plat was given, that was dedicated as a public street. And the Planning Commission said if it wasn't a public street, then the name change would be fine, but if it was a public street, to leave it then as Dan, to avoid confusion of emergency responders coming in off Washington Boulevard. So in their recommendation to you, they are recommending only this lane be named to the Tech College Drive. Since the Planning Commission made their recommendation, there was some discussion with the college about these names. And it was determined to make an amendment to what the Planning Commission recommended to you and call this Tech College Drive West and this Tech College Drive East, to also give some clarification on what side of the campus those streets are on. There had been some discussion with the engineering department that the name should not be the same on both. I think in part of that discussion, that was a solution to call the one west and the other east of that circle drive. So in the ordinance that you have before you, that change has been made. That had not gone to the Planning Commission, was felt that since that point that this was just a clarification and would not need their further review of that. That's a decision you could make in your public hearing to use the east and west designation. So the recommendation to you is to approve the renaming of ABC Lane to Tech College Drive West, and then naming Tech College Circle and Tech College Drive East. So those are the items that are on the ordinance for you tonight to consider.
Mr. Montgomery, I just want to make sure I'm clear on one item. So Dan Street, two points, confusion on kind of using the same name and also that it's a public street. So is there any opening for them at a later date to rename that with a different name, or is the book closed because it's a public street?
Well, there's always a possibility to do name changes. I mean, that is even something you can consider tonight, whether you want to add that to this. And then you'd have to just revise the ordinance to do that. But that's always a decision you have before you to consider, to name a public street. And I think that's where some of the split vote from the commission came from, was just that idea that some of them didn't see the difference in, since it's in and out, a one-way street each way, where it could create the confusion. So that is just a decision you could make if you decided to.
Any other questions for Mr. Montgomery? Okay, and is the petitioner here tonight too?
Yes, they are.
Okay, well, if the petitioner wants to come up.
My name is Patrick Dean. You probably all know who I am. I'm the facilities director at the college. We are in approval of that, barring the fact of Dan Street being a city road, but that's okay. We'll fight that battle when it comes to it, but we're happy with the resolution as it stands. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Dean? We do appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, this is a public hearing, so at this time we'll accept public input if there's any public input on this petition.
Seeing none, I will make a motion that we close the public hearing.
I'll second it.
We have a motion from Vice Chair Blair and a second from Councilmember Van Hoosier to close the public hearing. This is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
And then a motion on the proposed ordinance
Or further discussion?
or further discussion among council members?
I guess, I'm completely supportive of everything recommended here, but I guess I just want to make sure that you guys know you can always come back with another proposal, another dazzling name.
Okay, thank you.
And if there's no further discussion, I would just make an motion to approve.
I'll second it.
We have a motion from Councilmember Gochner and a second from Councilmember Van Hoosier to adopt proposed ordinance 2012-17. This is a roll call vote.
Councilmember Gochner,
Aye.
Councilmember Stevens,
Aye.
Councilmember Van Hoosier,
Aye.
Councilmember Wicks,
Aye.
Vice Chair Blair,
Aye.
Chair Garner.
Aye. This ordinance passes. Thank you. Next is public comments. This is an opportunity to address the council regarding your concerns or ideas. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. In this form of government, all city personnel are the responsibility of the administration, not of the council. Please discuss any concerns you may have regarding staff with the mayor, chief administrative officer, or department directors.
We've got to stop meeting like this. Once again, I've prepared a couple of slides for you about the water rate issue.
And you'll notice I'm giving you some time.
My name is still Dan Schroeder, and I still live at 1444 Binford Street. And thanks to Glenn.
Don't thank him yet.
Glenn's just saying I miss Amy Sue right now.
I emailed it to her a while ago. I didn't realize she wouldn't be here today. It's the most recent item, yeah. Can I just double click on something? It's this one here. That's right.
The overhead's working.
I didn't bring a printout, I'm sorry.
And Mr. Chair, if you wish, even if we need to get the system up and running, or if we need to make copies, we could take a short break and accomplish that.
I was going to say, too, if there's any others that have public input, we can take that at this time while they're working on this, if there's any others in the audience.
I'd be a little uncomfortable with them
Yeah.
doing it at the same time there at the podium.
Watch this for about a minute. If it doesn't come up, we'll take a short break. Well, now we'll come back from our break, and we're ready for public input.
Are you ready? Okay. Thank you. So I've just prepared a couple more slides on utility rates. First, I want to explain how to avoid bonding because there were some claims that this was impossible or impractical. I only got the detailed spreadsheet on the consultant's latest work at 3:30 this afternoon, and I haven't actually had time to reformulate the whole thing and work it out to the last dollar. But I think I can promise you that this would work down to the nearest $100,000 or so, which I think is close enough. So the way to do it is to start with what they're calling option 3. Go ahead and build the filter plant in 2014, put off some of the pipe replacement. The proposed bond, according to their calculations, you didn't see this Thursday, but according to their calculations, the proposed bond would then only be under $13 million in 2014. Then you also postpone the Wheeler Creek intake. I think we heard that that was possible. Postpone the meter replacement by 2 years. Draw down the cash balance by quite a bit, leaving only a little over $1 million in the cash balance. The consultants aren't going to like that, but I don't see why you can't do it. If any of these previous things are unpalatable, you can always borrow money from the sewer fund, which has $13 million in it, and if you want to move the cash around or something like that, that's always possible. I don't think it's necessary. The other thing you have to do is cut operating expenses by about $1.5 million per year, and I'm going to show you on the next slide how that's possible. Under these circumstances, all you need is a 5% rate increase for 2 years, and after that, only consumer price index increases. Now, why is it possible to cut operating expenses by $1.5 million? The reason is if you look at the fiscal year 2011 operating expenses, $1.6 million of it was not operating expenses. It was actually charged to the bond. It shows up as an operating expense only because of the accounting requirements for street, curb, and gutter work that was associated with pipe replacements. It's a little more complicated if you look at the 2012 budget, and I don't have time to go into that with you, but I'd be happy to sit down with any of you and explain that as well. Totally different subject is how to apportion the charges among users, the details of the rate structure. I sent you an email about this a couple of days ago. It's very complex, and we didn't really hear the full picture or all the details last Thursday. But in summary, from what we did hear, it appears that the percentages that would come from the base rate, which were claimed to be 40, 35, and 30, are actually inaccurate. If you look at actual historical use data, it's much higher than that. Secondly, if you look at the historical use data, that proposed rate structure would generate too much revenue. It would be 5.6% above the 7.5% that we're trying to implement for 2013. The base rate breakdown is rather erratic, and finally, the summer tier structure doesn't really reflect Ogden's smaller lots and smaller usage levels compared to state standards. My question for the council, a little bit rhetorical for now, but still serious, is there a time and place when we can discuss these details? They are very complicated, and someone needs to sit down and hash them out when we're not in such a hurry. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schroeder. Okay, other individuals for public comment?
My name is Lee Ramage, and I just moved here last July, and I just got my new water bill through my apartment complex, and the water is separated out per person per unit, and the sewer is not. So I guess my question is, who decides and how do they decide to separate the billing for the sewer usage? Because it's just me and my little chihuahua who doesn't use the toilet, and there are other people in the complexes that have 4 or 5 kids, and their sewage rate is the same as mine, even though the water rates are separate. So that was my question to you folks.
Thank you. Any other public input? Comments from administration?
No, thank you.
Comments from council staff? And council members? We will try to get somebody to get some answers for you, okay? Next is consideration of adjourning into a closed executive session. Mr. Williams.
Chair, a closed executive session is permissible for the purposes set forth on the agenda.
Motion?
I will make a motion that we adjourn into a closed executive session for the reasons outlined in the agenda.
I'll second it.
We have a motion from Councilmember Wicks and a second from Councilmember Van Huzer to adjourn into a closed executive session. This is a roll call vote.
Councilmember Stevens?
Aye.
Councilmember Van Hoosier?
Aye.
Councilmember Wicks?
Aye.
Councilmember Gochner?
Aye.
Vice Chair Blair?
Aye.
Chair Garner?
Aye. Thank you. We'll now adjourn into the closed executive session and then we'll return. We want to welcome you back to the Ogden City Council meeting for April 10th, 2012. Let the roll call reflect that all council members are present with the exception of Councilmember Heyer. And now we will discuss agenda item number 9 on the amended agenda for the proposed budget opening, and Mr. Christopoulos.
Chairman Gardner, council members, the proposed budget opening is based on a project that we have addressed and titled Startup Ogden, which is the development of an app center, and the app center being a particular facility where app developers come together, and there is an award program that is being designed, and also the creation of a center for technology that will involve the Weber State University bookstore and also the Weber State continuing education programs at 2313 Washington, which is we now call the Ogden Rocks building as its nomenclature, which will have to come up with a new name at that particular point. The purpose, as we have tried to describe, is this is our initial technology magnet center for the development of technology economic development initiative in conjunction with Weber State in order to basically promote the development of a certain type of technology. We've talked about apps development, but our intent is to also make it a technology and education center at the center of the city. And to do that, we have a budget opening that John will explain further in detail, but part of this is coming from an EDA grant that has been agreed to. It's not fully awarded until we complete the rest of the parameters, which are basically making the match grant that'll come that we'll go through in the discussion of the budget opening. But with that particular said, this particular project then would be ready to move and would be operational sometime in our estimate around August or September. Any other questions?
Any questions? Okay, thank you. Mr. Arrington.
Chair Garner, members of the council, the financial aspects of this will be addressed as follows. There's $430,000 in the BDO retained earnings fund that was to be allocated in fiscal year 2012 that has not been allocated yet by the council. The proposal is to transfer that money to the miscellaneous grants and donations fund. That fund is used because the primary aspect of this activity is federal and grants. So that's why it's accounted for in that fund. So the budget opening appropriates that $430,000 from retained earnings to the miscellaneous grants fund. In addition to that $430,000 going to the miscellaneous grants fund, we are recognized the $1 million EDA grant, as well as $50,000 from Weber State University's foundation. That accounts for $1,480,000 that will be new money going into the miscellaneous grants fund. And the proposed appropriation is for $145,000 of that to go into the program loan activity, with $1,335,000 going into building purchase and renovations. That $1,335,000 is $235,000 of the city's money, $50,000 from Weber State, and the $1 million is the EDA grant. That's the source and the application of the funds in this budget opening.
So, Mr. Arrington, just to clarify, on the agenda, we talk about $1,910,000, but the amount is $1 million.
Okay, that's because there's new money of $430,000 in the BDO fund, and there's new money of $1,480,000 in the miscellaneous grants fund. The new money that's available is $1.9 million when you combine both. I mean, some of it's just between funds, but we have to increase the budget by the $1.9 million because there are two increases.
I just wanted to clarify the numbers.
And the action requested tonight is to set the public hearing for this.
Okay, further discussion? Motion?
Chair Garner, I move that we pass ordinance 2012-18, amending the budget for the fiscal year July 1st, 2011 to June 30th, 2012 by $1.910 million.
And to set the public hearing then?
Set the public hearing, yes.
So what we're doing is setting the public hearing for April 24th? Is that what you're saying, Susie?
Yes, I am, for April 24th.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Van Huser to set and a second from Vice Chair Blair to set the public hearing for April 24th, 2012. This is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Further discussion? All right. Okay, that will set the public hearing for April 24th, 2012.
Motion to adjourn.
Second it.
Motion from Councilmember Gochner and a second from Councilmember Wicks to adjourn the City Council meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? This is a reminder that the City Council work session will be held immediately following this meeting, and the purpose of the work session is to discuss the utility rate study and council business.